TikTok won't stop serving me decontextualized clips of the menu from 2022, and I don't know what to make of this. If you haven't seen it, don't worry. It's from that cultural moment a little while back that was really invested in a critique of the super wealthy. Aren't they rich? Aren't they fascinating? Don't they deserve to be punished? Think of films like Ruben Ostlund's Triangle of Sadness, or TV shows like The White Lotus or Succession. I've always thought there's a limit to how useful these are as critiques of capitalism. In an excellent essay over at The Face, Patrick Sproul points this out.
There is no valuable political use to this trend of anti-capitalist satire, because these films and TV shows are never trenchant enough to seriously provoke and, frankly, wouldn't be released if they were. More pressingly, they're all far too similar. No matter how smart a script might be, if every film is telling you the same thing, rich people bad, in the same terms, it becomes monotonous. Anti-capitalist art is now a genre, one safe enough to be reproduced by the very people it's supposed to target.
When it comes to the menu, we'll get to the anti-capitalist bona fides of the film in a minute, but every time this popped up on my TikTok feed, the comments were all full of similar questions. What was with the cheeseburger scene? Why didn't they try to escape? Could anybody explain the ending? All of these questions on so many different chopped up portions of the film, and yet none of them acknowledged that there is a way to answer all of these questions, and more besides. You could watch the menu. Look, this isn't a video lamenting the decline of the movie experience. The business has been on the way down for a while now. It never really recovered from the high point of the COVID-19 pandemic. And, industry monopolists' tendency to refuse to pay the people who make these films enough so that their careers are sustainable, instead preferring to squat over their intellectual property like a dragon hoarding gold. All of this is to say that we could watch the menu. We could. But we don't want to do that. We get served slivers of this film, scaled down to fit on a screen and edited with subtitles. I can't stop watching them, and I don't know why. The Menu is a 2022 film directed by Mark Mylod, written by Seth Rice and Will Tracy. It stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Nicholas Hoult, Ralph Fiennes, and the iconic Judith Light, among others. It follows a celebrity chef, Julian Slowik, played by Fiennes, who operates a bespoke fine dining restaurant called Hawthorne, situated on an inaccessible, remote private island. A group of diners is invited for a tasting menu, which runs to around $1,200 per person. The group is made up of 3 tedious tech bros, Soren, Dave, and Bryce. There is an old money married couple who've been dropping thousands on Slowik's food for a very long time. There's a washed-up movie star, George Diaz, played by the ever-excellent John Leguizamo, who wants to try and revive his career by getting into food documentaries, and he's brought along his personal assistant, Felicity. There's a rather too full of herself critic famed for negative reviews, Lillian Bloom, and her obsequious editor, Ted. God, remember when print media had that kind of pull? Finally, there is Nicholas Hoult, who plays Tyler, a whiny, boring food nerd with an obsession with Slowik, and his date for the evening, a companion called Margot, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. The group arrive on the island and are given a tour by the cultishly devoted staff, all waxing lyrical about the quality of the produce. At the start of every course, Slowik gathers the attention of the entire room with a clap, and God, their sound design has so much fun making that clap louder and much more sinister as the film goes on. Every course starts with a monologue and an object lesson about what they're about to consume, delivered in the impeccably haughty tones of Ralph Fiennes' received pronunciation. The aim, and you'll have to forgive me for spoiling the entirety of the meal, is that Slowik is a psychopath, burned out on the empty consumerism of his art and the indifferent snobbery of the super wealthy. All these people who want to be seen to be eating at Hawthorne, but don't care about who he is or what he wants to achieve. His food has become an empty monument to the consumerism of contemporary capitalism, from the crude excesses of the tech bro to the aesthetic snobbery of the legacy media critic. I won't get into how it ends, but even if you've never seen the film, you know none of these people are making it out of here alive, right? Because in a way, none of these characters are people either, right? They're broad stand-ins, symbolic representations of a fairly straightforward critique of the rich. Pretentious, corrupt, boring. All of them have, directly or indirectly, contributed and furthered the degradation of Slowick's art. It's not without reason that he tells all of them, all of the guests and his entire kitchen troupe, that they're going to die that night. And all of this brings us to arguably the most important scene in the entire film, the cheeseburger scene. Throughout, Margot hasn't eaten any of the food. She commits the great sin of fine dining. She sends the food back and tells Slowick that his food isn't made with love. She asks for a cheeseburger, and Slowick promises that
I'll make you feel as if you're eating the first cheeseburger you ever ate. The cheap one your parents could barely afford.
For Slowick, there's a genuine pleasure in putting together the burger made with the finest American cheese.
The best cheese for a cheeseburger because it melts without splitting.
Slowick makes the cheeseburger, and there's a joy to it, a very simple and almost innocent kind of joy, connecting an artist back to the thing that they love to do. Sending the food back is what allows Margot to walk out of there. It's a moment wherein Slowick is challenged to produce something that resonates with someone beyond the level of just being a consumer. The film is broad, and the types are fairly clear. For all the talk of a resurgence in class consciousness in popular cinema, the menu struggles to get beyond pointing out that the rich are kind of weird and don't really care about the aesthetic significance of fine dining. The tech bros are there because they can charge the dinner back to their employer. The old money couple, they're there mostly because it seems appropriate that people with their kind of wealth should go to restaurants like Hawthorne. The critic is there in a professional capacity. And then there's Tyler. Now, Tyler is interesting because Tyler is a fan. He loves Slowick. He loves fine dining. He loves the gadgetry and sophistication of a formal fine dining kitchen. He is so desperate to not just love the food, but to be liked by the people that make it, that he can't help but come off as pathetic. Margot sees the food as deeply pretentious, something which irritates Tyler no end. It turns out that he's been writing to Slowick for months beforehand and knows exactly what the chef has got planned for the entire evening. Despite that, he still hired Margot to come with him because his previous date broke up with him before the dinner. He is a cringe loser, and he does not live to see the end of the evening. It's Margot who is the critical character of the film and the closest that the film gets to making a class-based argument. As I mentioned, Margot is there in a professional capacity. She, like Slowick, is in the service industry, even if the services they provide are pretty different. She's almost certainly going to die with the rest of them until she makes an aesthetic request of the chef. While it's often referred to as a black comedy, and it can be very funny, it also leans very heavily into horror tropes. Violence, when it arrives, is intense and shocking. But the thing that the film underscores is that the reaction of the wealthy and the rich to the appearance of violence is essentially one of passivity. They are, quite literally, consumers. And as the film unfolds, it turns out that all they're really capable of doing is sitting there and taking what's dished out to them.
Ask yourselves this entire evening, why didn't you all try harder to fight back? To get out of here? Honestly, you probably could have. Something to think about.
So I sit there, watching, scrolling, consuming, enjoying these little amuse-bouche pieces of a film that's been chewed up and presented to me by an algorithm that is trying to predict what I like. And of course, no matter what I do, no matter how I respond, all I'm doing is providing more information to that algorithm to further refine the next set of recommendations that it makes. The reason I've started thinking about this so much, and the reason I decided to make this video, is not because the film kept cropping up on my TikTok FYP. No, if anything, that's what drove me back to rewatch the film for the first time in a while. No, the reason I decided to make this video is because there's a question that emerges in the course of the film that the world of the film doesn't know how to resolve. It's a critique of high-cost food culture. They got Dominique Crenn to design the menu. They got David Gelb, the guy behind Netflix's Chef's Table, to be the second unit director and to make sure that all of the food looked right. But why? Why food? Really, I don't think this is always useful or warranted, but there's something about the menu that demands to be read allegorically. Slowik is wrestling with the question of what it means to try and create art in an environment that has subordinated cultural production to a sort of crude economic calculus, an environment that he himself says has made him a monster. The question that the film dodges is whether or not fine dining is a form of art at all. After all, isn't the menu just something that's supposed to make you content? Isn't it just something that you're supposed to consume? The old money couple who've been coming to Hawthorne for years and dropping thousands of dollars each time they visit can't even remember the name of a single dish they've had there.
It wasn't cod, you donkey. It was halibut.
It isn't art. It's just content. They aren't patrons. They're just consumers. So the question is, what would happen if you read Slowik as less of a chef? I mean, he really only does one bit of actual cooking in the entire film, and more as a type of another figure, the artist. There's the money men who demand alterations and control your fate. There's the critic who can make or break your reputation. There's the tedious tech bros who see you as, at best, an asset that they can exploit, or at worst, a liability that will give them a nice tax write-off. Then there's Tyler, a stand-in for the fandom, desperate not to just experience what you have to offer, but to take all of who you are, to collapse the distinction between artist and work, obsessed with technique, but with no real skill of his own. He is an eater, the world's perfect consumer. So in a way, I think it's kind of perfect that it's this film that got served back to me and hundreds of thousands of people on a platform that's designed to turn art into content. In their new book, Filter World, the writer Kyle Chaker points out that we have shifted to a mode of culture entirely dominated by algorithmic recommendation, which has resulted in a sort of cultural flattening.
This shift has lowered many cultural barriers to entry. Since anyone can make their work public online, it has also resulted in a kind of tyranny of real-time data. Attention becomes the only metric by which culture is judged, and what gets attention is dictated by equations developed by Silicon Valley engineers. The outcome of such algorithmic gatekeeping is the pervasive flattening that has been happening across culture. By flatness, I mean homogenization, but also a reduction into simplicity. The least ambiguous, least disruptive, and perhaps least meaningful pieces of culture are promoted the most. Flatness is the lowest common denominator, an averageness that has never been the marker of humanity's proudest cultural creations.
There's an additional element here, which is that the menu was not created or designed to be algorithmically distributed and recommended this way. The films and television shows which are sashimied up to us on TikTok have to be edited. The footage has to be cropped and scaled so that it's going to fit on a phone screen. There is no single chef back there woeful and raging against the subordination of art to economic calculus. What there is is a series of digital tools, a suite of algorithms, whose purpose is not to give us an unexpected sensation or to help us develop a new sense of taste, but rather just to give us more of what it already thinks that we like. Like it or not, we're all Tyler now. But perhaps we don't have to be. Perhaps there is a way of finding a different relationship with content that allows it to be something other than just an exercise in consumption. So it's towards the end of the film that Margot does the unthinkable, sends the food back. She tells the chef that he works out of obsession and not love. And isn't it love that makes food something other than just content? Isn't it love that could raise food to the level of something close to art? She asks for a cheeseburger, something immediate, something loaded with memory, maybe the first food that you ever had outside of the home, the one that your parents could barely afford. And when Margot tries it, she gets to leave. She has a direct experience with something that is more than just content designed for easy consumption. Can we do this? In an era of algorithmic flattening in which all of the mechanisms of culture are designed to make this so flat and seamless and passive, can we send this back? Can we ask for something new? And look, this isn't a new problem either. The intersections of technology and culture are well established, as Walter Benjamin wrote in his famous study on art.
No investigation of the work of art in the age of its technological reproducibility can overlook these connections. They lead to a crucial insight. For the first time in world history, technological reproducibility emancipates the work of art from its parasitic subservience to ritual. To an ever-increasing degree, the work reproduced becomes the reproduction of a work designed for reproducibility.
This kind of content-to-consumption model is not reversible. We can't just decide to not engage with the algorithmic mechanisms that determine our cultural landscape. But Margot identifies a real problem, and so the challenge for us is how to find some agential capacity to respond to the cultural content that we're presented with. Right towards the end of Filterworld, and one of the reasons I thought this allegorical reading of the menu made sense, comes this point.
If there is a simple answer to breaking down Filterworld, then it might be something like a version of the slow food movement as it was popularized in the 1990s, but for culture. Slow food was a reaction to the domination of industrial farming. It argued for a deep consideration of where food comes from and how it is made, considering not just the end product, but the entire process of how it arrives at the consumer. The movement rewarded farmers who pursued small-scale businesses that grew sustainably over the long term, and chefs who knew and prized the provenance of their ingredients. Customers learned to prize these qualities too, though the qualities of provenance and obscurity sometimes became extremist fetishes of their own. We need to bring that same understanding of sustainability and specificity to the way that we consume and support culture online too.
Or, to put this in the language of the menu, even if all we want is a cheeseburger, at the very least, it should be made with love.